Hello and welcome back to everyone that's tuned in to the American Ultra Stock. Thank you so much for tuning in. My apologies for my absence for the past few videos, but Braden has been holding it down, and he brought to us a preview of this video that today we're having to review a game that was, well, I think that the scoreline was a little bit deceiving. A bad start in terms of result, but perhaps a valiant performance up to a certain point. The U.S. has unfortunately lost 3-0 to France. Braden, immediate thoughts after a match that, frankly, I thought we held our own for most of it. Very weird match.
Yeah, that is my main initial thought. The scoreline definitely flatters France. It's not, it was a much closer game than that. I actually thought through the first 60 minutes and particularly to start the second half, we were the better side. I think maybe at the end of the first half there was a little bit of damage limitation, kind of just holding on for the result. But I would say for the majority of the first 60 minutes of the game, basically up until France scored in the 61st, and to be honest, even after that, until their second goal, I thought we were still the better team. And it's just kind of unfortunate because what you saw from France in terms of their goals, every single one of them, I would say, except for maybe the third one, you could say, but the first two for sure was just down to individual brilliance. And that's something that we don't have on our roster, and something that we probably wouldn't have on our main roster outside of maybe Pulisic. But when you're bringing guys like Lacazette with the amount of experience at the top level he has, and a player like Michael Olise who is on track to be one of the best wingers in the world, I mean, it's really unavoidable to concede a couple of those moments. And I thought we did really well throughout the game to hang in there with France. And you could tell even by the crowd's reactions on the broadcast, they were going quiet a lot of the time because they could tell that we were hanging in there. They were not happy with the performance from their team. And ultimately, I think there's a lot of positives that we can take away from this. We just can't let the late collapse get to our mentality, because I thought maybe if this game, even if it ended in a 1-0 loss or something like that, as long as we were pushing, and I mentioned this in the preview, as long as we had a good performance, it's not about the result, just inspire some confidence in the team. But losing 3-0, especially collapsing that late on, it could affect the mentality. And we just need to see how mentally strong these guys are. And I think we're going to get a good indication of that in our next group game.
Yeah, on that note, I think that this group has that fortitude, the mental fortitude to come back from this. Again, very deceiving scoreline. I thought we were really hard done by. I'm particularly saddened by the fact that perhaps a lot of casuals tuned in. And I have some people right here that don't really tune into soccer, some friends, and they were very encouraged by our first half performance. And then you look 3-0, they think that we lost by 3 touchdowns or something. So it's insane. But on that note, the mental aspect, how we respond to that will ultimately define our fate. But I think that there were a lot more positives than negatives overall. And I back these guys just based on their character. I think that they have enough to come back. And I think that Mitrovic as well, by the way that he talks on the behind the crest, he will definitely emphasize the positives on this group. And I think they have enough. They know it's the only time they get to play this. So hopefully it sets us up for better. But talking about all this fight that we put up in, rewinding back to the first half, Braden, where I thought was a very good way that we were set up. Any things that you want to highlight in terms of tactics? Any players that you think need to be highlighted? After this, we're going to do a player ratings as well. But visiting the first half, things that you think are worthy.
Yeah, so in the first half, in all honesty, it wasn't the most exciting game to watch. A little bit of the football terrorism, as a lot of people like to say. But in my opinion, that's a good thing. Against a team like France, who, like we've been saying, are the favorites to win this group by a large margin, probably the out and out favorites to win the entire tournament, to win gold at home. Having a boring first half is a lot better than maybe having an exciting half where we have some chances, but then they go and score a couple of goals, kind of like we saw in the second half. I'm not saying the second half performance was bad by any stretch. I mean, we'll get to that after talking about the first half, but I think a boring game suited us. If it had been boring, no chances either way, ended 0-0, I would have left the game elated. But unfortunately, it wasn't like that. I thought in the first half, there's not really many that stood out in terms of like an excellent performance, but I thought a lot of players were really solid. Zimmerman, I thought was pretty good. John Tolkien was pretty good. Tessman and Busio in the midfield were very good. And then Paxton Aronson on the wing. I thought those five were pretty solid. I will say Duncan Maguire, I wouldn't say he was bad. It's not like he made any mistakes or anything, but he just had a little bit of trouble getting into the game. And we kind of saw that the entire time he was on the pitch, which it kind of is what it is. I think we all expected that a little bit, just the kind of striker that he is. But not having an alternative to that on the bench, I think could end up hurting this team down the line, just because, if Maguire does get the chances, we know, we've seen him in MLS and at the youth level, he can score the goals, but he's not getting those chances. He hasn't really ever gotten those chances at this level with this group. So I'm just a little bit concerned about that position. And I thought Paredes was a little bit disappointing. I've seen some people complimenting his performance, and I like his aggressiveness, kind of similar to Cade Cowell in the way that he always wants to take on the defenders. He's much better technically than Cade Cowell, of course, but the athleticism isn't as much there. He's a small guy, and there's nothing he can really do about that. But he was falling a lot, getting bodied off the ball a lot. And I see a lot of people for the senior team criticizing Brenden Aaronson for stuff like that. But then when it comes to Paredes here at the youth tournament, which you can argue players of the youth tournament shouldn't have as much muscle to body him off the ball like that, it seems to go unnoticed. So I think that kind of deserves a little bit of mention and a little bit of criticism. But overall, for the first half, it's not like there was anyone who really stood out in a negative way.
Absolutely. I just want to compliment even Mitrovic and how they set up at the back. I thought that at moments where we had a bit of volume going forward, never in the final third, but in the second third, trying to build up something. This type of game, you're going to need talent to stand out. And I just want to highlight how good the distribution was. I think that out of the back was really good. Token was really good under pressure, which was a huge improvement compared to the first time he played France. I think Tesman with the long balls, double-footed, were really good. But I think that Paxton, we saw in one play where he cuts it in and almost scores. It was a chance that he created by himself, really. A long ball that works to him. And this is something that I think we should see more from this team. Obviously, we were going against the favorites to win it all. So I think overall, a very good half. And on the note about Paredes, he was very disappointing the first time he played France as well. It seems like some people will catch on that maybe his future really will be at fullback. I don't know too much about his defensive, how good he is defensively. We haven't seen him play there for quite a while, but the physicality just isn't there to cut it at the top level. Maybe he'll need to adapt to his game, but overall a very good solid half. I think everyone was happy at the end of that. Moving on to the second half, I think we come back in the same gear, and honestly, props to us for even holding and being very, very concerned, very good and disciplined with the way we held a 0-0. We come to the second half, and unfortunately, what happened. Your takeaways on why that happened, Braden, and if you think we were hard done by.
Like I said in the start of the video, I think we were a little hard done by in terms of the score, but I will say there was more standouts in a positive way in the second half, but there was also more standouts in a negative way, just because it was a more open game. There was a lot of chances on either end, more so for us, I think you can say. I thought that, again, Tessman and Busio in the midfield were so good until Busio eventually came off around the 70th minute, the first sub. And that's one of the biggest mistakes I think we had. I'll get into the subs after talking about the performers, but I really didn't understand those choices. I thought Nathan Harriel was so good at right back, and it's something even as a Union fan, I didn't expect him to be that good. A lot of people have been saying he's one of the worst players on the roster, and I think if you look at the talent that we have, maybe it's a fair thing to say, but I thought he was one of the best players on the pitch. Proved a lot of doubters wrong, won basically every single duel he was in, just lockdown, and none of the goals really came from that side for what it's worth. Also, that long ball you were talking about in the first half to Paxton was also from Harriel. I didn't even know he had that in his locker, so props to him. Also almost scored a header towards the end of the game. I thought some of the subs came on and made a difference. Two of them in particular linked up on a goal, actually, that was called offside. I'm not sure if it was offside or not. The check went quickly, so maybe it was. But McGlynn, an excellent long ball. I will say that's the one thing that this team has done very well so far. The long balls from basically everyone have been on point. I think Schulte's maybe the only one who needs to work on it a little bit, but he's a goalkeeper, and even he had some nice ones that looked maybe a little bit shaky, but ultimately got to where they needed to be. McGlynn playing the ball, like I was mentioning, to Griffin Yao, who did so well to bring it down in contention with the defender, beat the defender, finish, just unlucky with the offside flag. I thought our attack was a lot more fluid. We were creating a lot more chances. Taylor Booth as well involved in that off the bench. But ultimately, I think the defense let us down. And I do think that the big turning point was John Tolkien. He had a great game. I thought he was very solid, but him missing that header and hitting the post, he was wide open. Great ball in from Paredes, who had a much better second half. And it was actually two chances that he created back to back. One was to Paxton, who, to his credit, he's also not the biggest guy, but somehow he got above the defender, forced the keeper Restes into a brilliant save. And by the way, I thought that their keeper was probably the man of the match, which, even though they won 3-0, I think it speaks a lot that the best player on the pitch was probably the French goalkeeper. It says a lot about our performance. But Paredes playing that ball to John Tolkien, unmarked, wide open. It wasn't even a save. He hit the post. And if that goes in, it's 1-1, a completely different ball game. They score minutes later, and from there on, it's basically a foregone conclusion. We make defensive subs for some reason, and it's just a France win. I think we really need to capitalize on that in the back as well. Schulte, both of the first two goals, inexcusable, really. It's not necessarily like a catastrophic error, but it's also two long shots that didn't have the most pace on them that he probably should have done better on, especially the first one really didn't have much on it. The second one did take a little bit of a deflection, so maybe less blame on him for that one, but I thought he should have done better. Makes you wonder why Slonina maybe wasn't starting. And then Miles Robinson, atrocious. It's such a disappointment that two of the three overage players we brought were probably our two worst players in the entire game. I mean, Miles Robinson, how do you lose your man like that on a corner? You're brought in to be the defensive experience and the quality in the back, and you just lose your man so easily on a corner, wide open header that they actually put away, and then it's 3-0. No chance for us to get back in the game. I thought he was poor, but overall, it was a much more exciting second half. If we can create the chances like that in the next game, I think it could go better.
Yeah, absolutely. Just want to highlight, you touched a little bit on the subs. We're going to get into that and the player ratings, obviously, but I was very puzzled. I think Buzio coming off, I understand that. That's how Buzio is, and I think he put a lot of work in today, a lot of work, right? He tires out. It's how his career has panned out so far, and nothing against him. It's just he gives his all. Around the 70th minute, he has to come off, and I thought that Yao should have played. I mean, I think out of the attackers, he's the one with more goal contributions in the season, and then he did really well in the last camp before the Japan one. Scored against France, and he got very few minutes. Excellent ball by Jack McGlynn, again highlighting how good this team is with the distribution. And you were straight on the point. Besides that shot on the crossbar by Mihailovic, I think he hasn't really done anything. He didn't do anything right. And him and Miles, even coming out of the back, claiming being strong with the headers, I think that it was mostly Zimmerman. Miles was just there, really. So solid game. I think that we combined. We saw when Booth came on, him and Tesman had some good combinations. We have the players to try to create something, but it's a very modest level of talent. So we need to build up and capitalize when we play lower level opponents, which will thankfully happen for the remainder of the group, and try to build upon that. But against France, let's remind ourselves, guys, they are the favorites. So I thought overall it wasn't a disappointing half, even though the scoreline was disappointing. Now bringing on to a player rating analysis. We'll briefly go through the players so you guys can let us know if you agree or not. As we go through the video, you can start typing. To Patrick Schulte, we both mentioned that he should have done better on the two goals. I will say a top level keeper saves that, a good keeper saves that. What do you think, Braden? His final rating, which maybe he was good with distribution, but when it mattered, unfortunately, he didn't do too well.
I thought he was very hit or miss with distribution. He had a couple of good ones, but admittedly, the good ones that he had were not the most confidence inspiring. They were a little bit shaky. You could tell there was some pressure on him, and the final ball wasn't even the most convincing. It did get to the desired player at some times, which was nice to see, but oftentimes it just went out of bounds or straight to France. And as a shot stopper, which is the main thing that he's supposed to be, I don't know if I've said this on the channel yet, but I view him as Matt Turner 2.0. Maybe his distribution is a little bit better, but he's just an MLS standout guy that will probably make his way to Europe eventually and probably fail. I don't rate him for his potential. Maybe he's better than Slonina now, but I think he's shown in this game that he might not be. He didn't really make any key saves. He just had a couple claims off of crosses, made one save off a long shot that was straight to him. I'm going to give him a 4.
Yeah, I'm actually gonna give him less. I feel kind of really harsh doing this because I thought in the first half he had one good save from a shot inside the box, parried it to a corner. Who was good claiming it. Again, never really inspiring security when he came to claim crosses or with the distribution. Thought it would have been a good match if he had done the minimum really of putting away those shots. I will say 3 to Schulte in my opinion. Moving on to Nathan Harriel, a very pleasant surprise in my opinion. How would you grade his performance, Braden?
I'm gonna give him. I think I'm gonna give him a 7.5. I thought he was fantastic. I thought he was our best defender defensively. Like I said, he won every single duel, so many of them every time he was asked to win it, whether it's in the air, on the ground, make the tackle. No, can't remember many times. Maybe there was one where he got beat 1v1, and especially going up against the players of the quality France has, I thought for the most part he frustrated them a lot. I mean, Olise was allegedly on his side. He kind of had a free roll, went everywhere, but Olise really didn't create anything up until when he was finally allowed to switch onto the other side, and that's where you saw his goal come from. So I thought Harriel was fantastic on the defensive aspect, even got forward, like we said, playing that long ball to Paxton that I didn't even know he could do, and getting up there on the set piece as well, winning the header, almost scoring. I mean, we know he has that in his locker. He scored a header against Guinea in a friendly in the previous camp, but I just thought he was fantastic and a sleeper pick for our best player. It might sound crazy to some just because he's not the biggest name. I think he's by far, if you look at transfer market, he's the lowest valued player, and it's not even close. Not a lot of people know who he is. Not a lot of people rate him because he plays in MLS. He's on the older side. He's not the most flashy, but I thought he was very solid, and I think he proved a lot of people wrong.
Yeah, I'll go with the 7. I think it was a really good match. It just doesn't feel right for me to put it at 7.5, but I thought it was a good match by him. Honestly, it's not that proved me wrong. I didn't really have a formed opinion on Harriel. Like you said, not the flashiest name. I don't watch too much of the Union when he's playing, so I thought props to him. Did himself a really good favor with this performance. I think a lot of more people will be confident in him, and it will do the world of confidence for him as well. He went up against the best team in the tournament with a lot of doubts and question marks, and he did well. I think also going forward didn't do too bad either, and I like how tenacious he was. If the ball spilled out, he was on it, and credit to this whole team on that. I thought they were very good with that. Moving on to the center back pairing where we had, let's start with Miles, probably the worst one of the two, very likely the worst one of the two. How do you see his performance, Brady, on a 1 through 10?
Easily the worst of the two. I'm going to give him, I gave Schulte a 4, right? If I gave Schulte a 4, I'm going to have to give Miles probably also a 4, I think. Even potentially worse than that, but I'll give him a 4. I just think, like I mentioned when we were talking about the second half, losing his man on the corner like that was inexcusable. He was very slow to come out to block some of the long shots they took that ended up in the back of the net, and ultimately I just don't think he's good enough. And especially, I think we're going to hit on this point when we talk about Mihailovic as well, but for an overage player, you're supposed to be one of the best players on the pitch, not a liability. It's a very concerning thing. We already knew we wasted one spot with Mihailovic. Now it's looking like we might have wasted 2. I mean, you see the quality of players and how much impact they're having for all the other teams in this tournament. Morocco's overage striker came in, scored a brace for them, ultimately ended up winning the game for them. You see what France did. 2 of their goals came from their overage players, Lacazette and Luc Bade, who I thought was very solid at the back as well. And ours are just ultimately making the mistakes that are leading to our opponent's goals. It's not what you want to see.
Yeah, I'll go honestly with it. I have to go with a 2 for Miles, because even though in that first half he did all right, I think it was mostly the shape and the way he was being protected, even on his side with Buzio coming in back, tracking back. I thought that Zimmerman made that backline look solid, and I think even the distribution, he always gave it to Tesman, and then it looked good. But when it came down to him as an overage player, I need to hold the standards. The bar has to be a little bit higher, and I think ultimately he didn't live up to that. Has to be a 2. Shambolic mistake for a guy that's an overage. I expect more. Moving on to the next one, it's Zimmerman, who I thought did all right. What do you think, Braden?
I'm going to give Zimmerman a 7. I think a lot of people give him unnecessary hate, especially when it comes to this game, just because they see him and Miles as a package deal. And in some aspect, it makes sense. I mean, they're both two MLS lifer type guys, center backs that have been with the USMNT that maybe shouldn't have been with the USMNT. They're the similar type of player in that regard. But I thought Zimmerman did so well today every time he was called upon, making the challenges, making blocks, getting to the ball, making sure that France never had any clear-cut opportunities, winning the headers in the air. I just thought he was fantastic in most of the aspects of the game for, I think, the majority of the match, and especially the fact that he had to partner Miles and the fact that he made the backline look so good despite how poor Miles was on the day. I think he was very underrated in the game, and I just encourage people to maybe look at him in a different light than Miles, because they're not the same player, despite them being the center back partnership. I think Zimmerman is the only overage player on this team who actually deserves to be there. And I think you can see that with his leadership off the pitch as well.
Absolutely. Coming off for the second half, out of halftime, him and Tessman were saying you can see the passion when they were giving their speech. And Zimmerman's a good leader. We've seen it in the past. Honestly, for this level, did himself proud. I'll put him at a 7-2. I feel like he wasn't as notorious as Harriel, but I can't give him any lower. I thought he did pretty well. And he was a monster at the back, a wall really, with claiming crosses, and I thought he did really good, really good. So 7 for him. Moving on to the left back, John Token, who maybe some people were really worried, myself included, coming into this match, and I think he did himself well as well. What do you think, Braden? Did get that miss, but how do you evaluate his match?
I think if you take away 2 moments, I would have given him a 7.5, but when you have to factor in his huge missed chance that, like I said, I think was the main turning point in the match, as well as on Elise's goal, I think he was a little slow to come out. The shot did eventually hit him, deflect off him, and then make it harder for Schulte to save. You could maybe argue that that's what ended up making it go in the net. I'm going to have to drop it to a 6.5 just because of those 2 moments. But I thought he was very solid, and he alleviated any worries I had about the fullbacks. Him and Harriel both, I think, did a lot better than I was expecting. So props to both of them for that.
Yeah, I'll go with the 6.5 as well. I mean, that header is, I don't like to say this, but it's kind of unlucky, really. I think he did almost everything right. Has to put it away. It's unfortunate it didn't go in, so that's the difference. That drops him down to 6.5 for me. Now going on to the midfield, Tanner Tessman, our captain on the day, which seems like he'll be the captain for the competition. What do you think, Braden?
I will just say I like the fact that he's the captain instead of giving it to an overage player. Although Walker is a good choice as well, I mean, we've seen that. But keeping it with Tessman, who's been the captain the whole cycle, I think it's a good decision. So props to Mitrovic for that, and props to Tessman for being a leader. I'm going to give him a 7.5 as well. I think he was very good. Definitely our best midfielder. His presence just in the midfield is so calming for a fan, because without him, I think there would have been a lot more opportunities for France. He just snuffs out everything so well. And like we've been mentioning, his long balls are fantastic. We've seen that since day one. So I don't think there was a lot of things he did wrong. Maybe there was a couple of misplaced passes that could have given him a higher rating, but overall, very solid performance.
Yeah, same for me. I'll give him a 7. I can't put him at 7.5, but it just doesn't feel right. But I thought he was very, very calm under pressure. There were a few balls that it was very, very hard to deal with, and he did really well, really calm. Left foot, right foot, the long balls speak for themselves. I thought he did really well. Even going forward when he played a little bit more of an attacking role. 7 for Tessman for me. Partnering with now his former teammate, likely. I don't think they're going to play again at club level, Gianluca Buzio.
I'm gonna give Busio a 7. I thought he was also very good. I mean, like you said, he did tire out, but in the 70 minutes he was on, he gave everything, and it's the complete opposite of what we saw against France the first time. I think he was one of the worst players in that match. Someone pointed out in the comments that we didn't really talk about it much in the videos leading up to it, and props to that person. I don't remember who it was, but they were completely right. I thought Busio just did the complete opposite in this game. I thought he was very solid on the ball. Looked nice driving forward, and ultimately progressed the ball a little bit. Didn't really lose it too many times. I thought his passing was very precise and consistent. Nothing too spectacular necessarily, but I don't think he really made any mistakes either. So I'll just give him a 7.
Yeah, I'll give him a 7. I even flirted with giving him a 7.5 based on my expectations for him, but I think 7 is just right. I thought Buzio did really well, really. The work rate, at times, if you look at the apps, You see that he got dispossessed quite a few times, but they were risky situations where he was trying to create something. It's like looking at a misplaced pass when it's a pass that tried to do something different. So really good match from him. I just hope that he stays fit because he's going to be really important going forward. He is in the basis of that midfield, which is concluded with Mihailovic. He was a third man there. And also, after you give his rating, do you think that he's going to keep his spot? I know that we all know he shouldn't, but do you think he will?
I think that he's definitely not going to start every game just because of the abundance of options we have there. And obviously, there's a lot more that weren't even on the roster. Sorry, Diego Luna. But I think squad rotation as a whole for basically every player is going to have to happen at some point, especially if we do make it far, like we have the ambitions to, just because of how small the squad is, how close together the games are. I hope he doesn't start the next game. I think there is bias to him not only being on the roster, but also playing just because of the connection he has with Marko Mitrovic, and that kind of just is what it is. But I thought he was probably the worst player on the pitch for us. If he didn't hit the crossbar, I'll give it to him props. That was an amazing shot from that distance. I thought he hit it incredibly. Very unlucky to hit the bar. I think it would have been a worldie of a goal, and it would have changed everything. I don't know how many of you guys have seen the meme that a goal changes everything. It has so many subpar ratings, and then you get a goal and it goes up. But I'm going to give Mihailovic a 3.5. I thought he was awful, and he was a liability, like Miles.
Has to be a 2 for me. I gave Miles a 2. I don't think he created anything. I think he gave the ball away a lot. Didn't help with the defensive shape. It was just a horrible match, really. For an overage guy, I'm going to hold him to a different standard right here. Has to be a 2. He hits that goal, yeah, it changes everything. But he didn't, sadly, which I hope that he does for the next matches. Not against the guy, but a really bad match for him, too. Moving on to the wings, we're going to start with Paredes.
Yeah, for Paredes, I thought, I mean, like I mentioned, he was pretty poor in the first half, I thought. Second half, he got better, was creating more chances, especially those two quick fire ones back to back. I'm going to give him a 6. I don't think he was necessarily too bad. He just, I think, lost the ball a little too many times than I would like to see from a winger. But then again, it also means that he's trying to create something. So you can take that as a positive, especially for a young player. He wasn't bad, but I don't think he was fantastic.
I think he lost the ball way too much. I mean, I understand he was trying to make things happen, but again, is it going to be a double standard? Because he looked like a weaker version of Brenden Aaronson on the feet when he was in the Prem. Are people going to point that out? I'm going to give Paredes a 5. Created 2 good chances, so a 5 seems like just like average, but ultimately I expected a little bit more. And moving on to the other wing right now, where we had Paxton Aaronson, had possibly the best 2 finishes, the closest we got to a goal besides the shots on the posts.
Yeah, like you said, I thought the chance in the first half created by Harriel and the chance in the second created by Paredes were both fantastic. And it's not like Paxton did anything wrong in those scenarios. He beat his defender both times, especially I think the second one was even more impressive because the first one, we all know he has that in his locker, beating a defender off the dribble. That's one of his main strengths. But getting up and beating a defender in the air, someone that's probably several inches taller than him and stronger as well, so impressive. For me, I did not expect him to win that duel, and forcing 2 big saves from the keeper. I'm going to give Paxton a 7. I think he was very solid and hugely unlucky to not get at least 1 goal.
Same. I'll have to give him a 7. I thought he was really good in the match, lively, made some bad balls look like good ones, so 7 for Paxton. I would like to flirt with the idea of him being a false 9. He showed it. He has the presence to do that. I mean, he beat his defender more than I expect Maguire to do in that case. So moving on to the big man up top, Maguire ran around, put a lot of effort in. Can't fault the guy for that, but what's his rating?
I think Maguire was just getting cardio out there. Ran around, didn't really touch the ball a lot. It's not like he did anything bad, but at the same time, from a striker, you want a little bit more presence up there. It sometimes felt like we were playing without a striker, which, I mean, at least if we have someone like Pax there, you have a false 9 that can drop in and create some chances. Maguire didn't really do that. He didn't really do much in terms of hold-up play. I thought some of his passes were inconsistent. I'm going to give him a 4.5.
Yeah, I'm going to give Maguire a 4. I think that really expect more, and I don't like how he comes deep sometimes to press, but then when we have the ball, he doesn't come deep to try to be an option. I just feel like his runs aren't really timed. Maybe it's a reflection of playing in MLS, but I mean, not a bad match necessarily. His flick-ons were pretty good in the first half at the few times he got on the ball. Moving on to the subs. First sub, Max Dietz, right at the back. Thought he looked good when he came on. Played more as a CDM.
So for the subs, I don't think any of the five really made enough impact to give them grades. So I'm actually just gonna, instead of grading them individually, I think it's a little unfair, especially since we didn't make subs until the 70th minute. I'm gonna grade the manager, Mitrovic, and I'm gonna give him probably a 4. Just because, in terms of the subs, I thought the tactics were solid. The starting lineup was solid, but the subs just did not make sense. Waiting until the 70th minute to make a change when you're already down 2-0, especially when we could have made a change earlier, an attacking one to get some boost, a spark in the attack, and maybe change the game, get us one back before we went down 2 or 3-0. And especially the first change being, like you said, Dietz, a traditional center back. I thought he was okay at the CDM. I don't think there was anything that showed that he can't play there. And ultimately, for the people that are wondering why he's here over Jalen Neal, I think that's one of the big reasons why, because he does provide that positional versatility that Neal doesn't have, playing as a 6. But bringing him on for Busio, a defensive change when we just went down 2-0 in a game that we've shown we have had the ability to be in and get a result from, I think just shows kind of a lack of ambition. I think that was kind of Mitrovic and the U.S. throwing in the white towel, waving the white flag, kind of just surrendering and saying, okay, we'll take our loss and move on to the next game. It's nothing against Dietz as a player. I think I really like him. I think I'm one of the highest in the space on him, but it just didn't make sense. And then McGlynn, Yao, and Booth, all those subs made sense, but they should have happened 15 minutes earlier. Waiting until the 76th minute when we'd just gone down 2-0 and went down 3-0 a little bit later. I mean, we saw what they did. McGlynn created the chance. Yao scored the goal that was offside. Booth had some lively runs. I hope to see all 3 of them start the next game. We'll see if that ends up happening. But ultimately, I think the substitutions for Mitrovic just weren't good enough.
I thought all of the guys did really well when they came on. And I actually can see what he was trying to do with Dietz. I think it was just a tactical change, try to release Tasman to the 8 position and have that solidity at the back if they were to counter. I like all the guys. I thought they did really well. I would hope to see at least Yao. I think, in my opinion, Yao has to start the next match. Put Paxton at the false 9, find a way to fit him in there. McGlynn showing that he is a guy that can help set the tempo if Busio tires out. So again, very late on. I wouldn't have a problem with the subs if they weren't honestly just a little too late. So I'll have to rate Mitrovic at a 4 as well. Let us know in the comments below, what do you think about this match? Obviously, we're going to have a preview coming out for the next match where we try to discuss how this sets us up for the group. I think that the hope should be there. This can still be the tournament that presents a silver lining for our summer. Let's hope that the boys put up a good performance. Make sure to leave a like, subscribe, share with your friends, and we'll see you next time.